So, Michael Verney of the Irish Independent is with us. Evening, Michael.
Joe, how are you?
Very well. Far too much football talk around these parts for my liking, Michael. Let's get into some good old-fashioned hurling, the most neglected sport of the last couple of months. We'll talk in a moment about Limerick, Tipperary and Kilkenny, Cork. First of all, there has been much discussion about the apathy with which the league has almost been treated by various teams. Where are you in broad terms? Have you enjoyed going to the league games? Have they not cut the mustard? Where is the health of the Hurling League 2023?
I'm not sure if I'm the best person to ask, Joe, because I'd enjoy going to a Junior C game, let alone a competitive inter-county game. But realistically, when you have a case, and it's very, very similar with the football finals this weekend, when you have a case where you are nearly almost punishing the high-achieving teams, the winning teams, the teams that are going for trophies by, when they get to league finals now, there's, in Mayo's case in the football, there's a week to their championship game. In Limerick's case, in the hurling, there's 2 weeks to the start of their championship. So there's something a little bit off there that as regards the proximity to championship. Then there's a whole other debate about, let's say, the Westmeads, the Offaly's, the Antrims, the Kerrys, who are just kind of yo-yoing up and down from Division 1 and taking 20-point beatings and not really, getting that now of that. Like, there's a massive game on Sunday between Kildare and Offaly, and with the best will in the world, and particularly if it's Kildare, if they win, it'll be a massive win and they'll be playing Division 1 hurling. But that's grand for a couple of months, and then there'll be a dose of realism when the league comes around next year under the current structures, where they're going to really struggle. They're going to be thrown in against 5 of the bigger hitters in Group 1A, as Offaly were last year, as Westmead were this year, as Westmead were the year before that, and they're going to take drubbing. So the whole structure has to be looked at. I personally will be going back to the old, like, Division 1A and Division 1B, where it's on a ranking system: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, maybe 7, and then 1, 2, 3, then 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 in 1B, and then the squeeze middle, as they call it, the Offaly's, the Kerrys, the Kildares are getting meaningful games against teams that are just above them, and the big hitters can, beat the crap out of each other for, 6 or 7 weeks over the springtime.
And in some ways, what happened to Waterford last year looms large, you suspect, in the thinking of many managers, where Waterford were brilliant in the league and looked full of energy and super fit and ready to go, and then there was effectively a complete collapse from minute one of the championship. Rightly or wrongly, that does seem to be in the minds of all the top teams, and it might take someone to do of Waterford and then have a very good championship to convince. But it goes beyond that. I remember Tipperary a couple of years ago, after going well in the league and then suffering in the round robin. Members of that team came out and said, well, maybe we need to revisit how much we put into the league. So that view seems to definitely have embedded, Michael. I don't know, are Waterford quoted very often?
No, I think from anecdotally, what I'm hearing is there was 2 weeks from the start of the Munster Championship to the end of the league. They obviously had that massive high, a pitch invasion down in Thurles on that Saturday night. And I actually not sure if they enjoyed it enough from what I'm hearing about it. And then they nearly went straight back into training. And the 2 week gap then between rounds 2 and 3, they went hell for leather again. So it was nearly, the button was always on. There was, they were at highs, but they were trying to keep those highs. There was no lows, there was no dips, there was no 4 to 5 weeks to allow for a training block of, a week's rest after a game, rest and recovery, high for 2 or 3 weeks and then taper back down. The time is just not there now. Now you're saying about, it'll take a team to go really well in league and championship maybe to book that trend. Well, Limerick are definitely the most likely to do it anyway. And, since the Cork game, they've been pretty high the whole way through, and they're hitting, a higher peak nearly with every game. So there's one team that I don't expect to drop off at all come championship, especially with the big names that they have to come back.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a bit more then. Limerick 128, Tipperary 25 points on Saturday night under lights. Tip ahead for a fair portion of this game. In the second half, Limerick didn't miss a single shot until the final minute, 1:15 to 9 points. Every Limerick player from number 4 through to 15 scored at least once. So there was a degree here of, okay, we see what you're doing, Tipperary. Let's just remind you where the level is.
Yeah, Joe, I've never seen a team across any sport I can think of, their ability to adapt and think mid-game is outstanding. you see so many teams. Remember the famous Tyson quote about, everybody has a plan until they get boxed in the face. Well, Limerick regularly get boxed in the face and are able to take it and just regroup, whether it's a half-time or a couple of years ago, whether it's a water break. They're just able to regroup. I don't know what stats, and analysis Sean O'Donnell, the great stats man, is sending down to the lads at half-time, and what Paul Kinnerk is saying and what John Kiley is saying. But the message is obviously clearly on the money. And they obviously, in the second half, they upped the physical stakes again. They, not the Tip were bullying them in the first half, but Tip were matching them and maybe overmatching them a bit physically. There was an element of Tip cannot keep this up for 70, 75 minutes. And there was also an element of, okay, Limerick are just getting in their groove now. I think, you said, I think they dropped a shot short in the second half, or maybe 2, but they didn't hit a wide. But in the first half, they scored 12 of 24 chances, and they would have been massacred over that at halftime. Massacred. 50%. It's 70 to 75% is what they're looking for on a given day. And to have, the guts of 100% in the second half is phenomenal. But I've never seen a team to adapt as well mid-game as Limerick. Usually when you're on the field, and I've been chatting a few different players about this, if you're overawed by, your opponent or a team and they have a run on you, it's so difficult to stop that there and then. Usually you're like, oh, we'll get a crack at them the next day, or I'd love to play them again, or we learn from it the next day out and we won't be complacent or whatever. Limerick are able to take all that and adapt during the game, and it's phenomenal. And not just adapt, like completely turn the game on its head, and that's what they did on Saturday night. And it was phenomenal to look at. They were 4 down at the break. Within 10 minutes they were level. Within 11 minutes they were up in the second half, and they were never going to lose thereafter. The one thing from Tip's point of view, it went to 9 at one stage, and you're thinking this could be an absolute hammer. And in fairness to them, and I think Liam Catlin would be delighted with this, would be the thing he'd be most happy about, is that they were just able to hang on to their coattails and not suffer a 15 or 20 point beating that would have put all their league to date to bed, basically. Yeah,
and your colleague Colin Keys had an amazing statistic which just underlines the point. So, and this is a Tipperary Limerick specific, but it bears out the second half dominance that you reference across the board on Limerick's part. So 11 games against John Kiley's Limerick for Tipperary. Before half-time, Limerick are minus 22 points. They are 22 points behind Tipperary before half-time. After half-time, they're 69 points ahead. So I don't know what's happening there. Do you see that as like Kiley and the brains of Kinnerk and anyone else you care to mention? Do you see this, Michael, as like tactical adjustments and okay, we see what you're doing and we're going to just change our point of emphasis tactically, or is there just a degree of not even tactics necessarily changing? It's almost like Limerick as a group look at each other at half time and just seem to up the ante.
Yeah, there's probably a few different facets in it. I'd say physically, like Tip through everything they had at them in that first half the other night, everything, and we're getting hot and heavy with them. But to call a spade, they weren't able to keep it up for 70 or 75 minutes. I remember Waterford in the semi-final a couple of years ago. They just went at Limerick so hard in the first 20 minutes that they were nearly out on their feet thereafter. So physically, there's definitely one part of it of not being able to, match up with Limerick for, what they need to do over a 75 to 80 minute period. Tactically, then it's like, as I said, they're able to adapt to what they see. Like Limerick retreated, at least 13 men behind the ball at different stages in the second half. Peter Casey was like a sweeping corner forward almost. We know him for like shooting the lights out and scoring 4 or 5 points from playing in an All-Ireland final, but he's dropping, ridiculously deep. And that's what they did. They clogged up all the Limerick or the Tipperary space that Jason Ford, Alan Tynan, etc. were excelling in the first half. They'd no space to operate in. They just choked them out. There were 2 particular scores in the second half. It's a mixture of everything, Joe. Their skill level is unbelievably high. Jake Morris has a half goal chance at one end. He's kind of turned over 2 to 3 stick passes, and it's a point over the bar at the other end. Noel McGrath has a chance from out underneath the stand. It drops short. Bang, bang, bang. It's over the bar at the other end. So they have teams tactically, they have teams physically, but I think skill-wise, they have teams as well. They execute their plan to absolute perfection. And part of it is probably as well that muscle memory of when a game is coming down the stretch, you don't panic. You're not looking for the finish line. You're just looking to get more scores on the board. And like Limerick have never lost a fight. This Limerick team has never lost a final as well. Yeah. So this is the interesting part, even going into this Kilkenny final as well. An interesting part as well of, if they were to be defeated in a final, would that dent their confidence at all. But it doesn't look like it, and they go into the final as roaring hot favourites as well, of course.
Yes. Or would a loss make them incredibly angry and they'd win the next 25 All-Irelands? I mean, who knows?
Just on that, Joe, like, if you're going to beat Limerick at this stage, this is the thing about the round robin that's bad for other teams. You want to beat Limerick in a knockout game. You do not want to have to play them again. Kilkenny beat them in a semi-final in 19.
Yeah.
Limerick probably would have fancied their chances in, 8 out of the next 10 games, but it wasn't a round robin game. It wasn't a provincial game. So, like, if they are to be beaten, if there's any element of complacency, that will be knocked off them in a defeat. So it's kind of a difficult one. If you're going to beat them, you kind of have to really beat them when it matters.
Yes. 19 in a perverse way, potentially Brian Cody's finest hour. That brings us to Kilkenny. They beat Cork 222 to Cork's 22 points, so 6-point win. Billy Drennan scored 113, 8 of them frees, 465s, but that's a very healthy return for a new man on the scene there. Cork's lack of intensity, lack of physicality has been much critiqued, Michael. What would you say about this game, and then give us a view on Kilkenny under Derek Ling?
It was a funny game from a Cork perspective, Joe, because I was looking at it from the press box and I wasn't 100% sure what exactly they were trying to do. They seemed to be caught between a couple of different styles of, they played the ball through the hand and it was, off the shoulder passing maybe to about the 65, and then they were delivering ball in, but the ball they were delivering in for, relatively young, athletic, speedy forwards was just not up to scratch, really. It wasn't that real kind of fast ball out to a side away from a defender. It was, it was a 60-40 ball in the forwards' favour. It was kind of strange in that respect. I thought they'd use the ball an awful lot better, like they had during the league. They obviously went down a man as well when Owen Downey got sent off, and that kind of, that curtailed them a fair bit too, and Kilkenny got a bit of a head of steam. But again, like Tipperary, they probably could have been beaten out of sight, and they got it back to 4 in injury time. But I'm a bit of a doubting Thomas with Joe Cork because with Cork, Joe, because I've went all in on them before a couple of times, and I've been left with egg on my face. And I was kind of a bit of a believer going into that game on Sunday, and now I'm a bit of a doubting Thomas again, because you're just not 100% sure what you're going to get on a given day with them. And I think they were kind of caught between styles the other day. As regards Kilkenny, Kilkenny are blending the modern and the old methods. A lot of what Brian Cody, did for the 23 seasons he was in charge there still remains. It's just a bit of a modern mix to it. Their striking is a bit crisper in around that, 25, 30 yard pass where they're trying to build. There's more runners off the shoulder now than there was before. And in the likes of Billy Drennan, Timmy Clifford, David Blanchfield, Derek Corcoran, there's a nice sprinkling of new faces coming in, and that's not to mention TJ Reid, Adrian Mullen, and a couple more that will be back in time. Owen Cody was missing for the weekend as well, so they're in a pretty good place, particularly depth wise. There's a fair depth to that Kilkenny squad, and you'd have to say, like, after being beaten by Tipperary in the league and being beaten pretty comprehensively, Derek Ling has bounced back fairly spectacularly. And if you're looking at a team that will not care about, winning, won't be worrying about whether he's going to go 100% for the league or not. They will go hammer and tongs for the league because they see it as a great opportunity to get silverware. Cody always targeted the league, always tried to get silverware. So in that sense, I think you're set up for a humdinger of a final.
So look, you'd have a great feel for how much to read into the league, and you would have seen all the games. I think all of us know that Limerick go into the All-Ireland series as roaring red-hot favourites. How do you see, based on the league and how much you want to read into different aspects, how do you see the pecking order of the chasing pack at the moment, Michael? And how close is number 2 to Limerick?
Probably not as close as they were last year, Joe, I'd say. Just because, Cian Lynch, 2-time hurler of the year, is back, and he's back in form. Like, Limerick were in trouble. 21 minutes into the first half, he comes up with 2 or 3 big plays, gets them back into a game. Gerard Hegarty didn't play the other night. Dan Morrissey didn't play the other night. Kyle Hayes didn't play the other night. Their depth has increased immensely, I would say, in the off-season. You have the likes of Colin Coughlin coming in now, Adam English, Colin O'Neill was brilliant the other night, Donegal O'Donnell. There are a lot of names that we haven't really heard before. So they're getting stronger. So if anything, the gap, which was quite close last year, Kilkenny got within a score. Clare drew with them 3 times, I think, last year, and were only beaten in extra time. The gap to me has grown probably a bit. Unsure about where Clare are at the moment. I think if I'm looking at the pecking order, I'd probably still have Limerick 1, Kilkenny 2, and probably have been haven't been blown away by Galway in the league. Now, they haven't had a full strength squad or anything out, but I think the two teams that played in the All-Ireland final last year are still 1 and 2. And that's a bit of a contradiction in a sense, because Munster is a fair bit stronger than Leinster, but Kilkenny kind of belittle any arguments about that any time they play any of those big teams. They blew away Clare last year, and they were very close to Limerick in an All-Ireland final. So I think it's probably Limerick 1, Kilkenny 2, and a myriad of teams there in around Clare, Cork. I'd have Waterford a fair bit down the pecking order. I haven't been impressed with what I've seen with them so far in the league. They're trying a lot of different things. One is Desi Hutchinson out around the middle of the field, which I can't get my head around, given he's one of the best inside forwards in the country. Maybe we're being hoodwinked and there'll be a different team come a championship, but they're playing Limerick in the first round. So they're going to get a fairly rude awakening come April 22nd, 23rd.
Yeah, because even, I caught Henry Shefflin talking about, after one game which was heavily criticised on the television highlights about lacking intensity, Shefflin was kind of saying, to be fair, there are different training loads at the moment and periodisation happening, and so, I felt like that was as close as any managers were going to come out and say, just bear with us, what you're seeing here may not reflect reality, and he can't come out and say it too explicitly.
Yeah, the only thing is that all teams are going through different blocks at the moment. Limerick were in Portugal, I think. Cork are heading off to Johnstown House in a couple of weeks. I think the vast majority of teams now are doing pretty heavy training throughout the league and just playing through the games at the weekend. And you kind of have to, because of the proximity to the championship. You just have to get that big load of training in. So I go with the teams that are actually showing a bit of form. I think it's good. I think Limerick's graph will only grow as the season goes on. Kilkenny's having kind of been put back in their box maybe against Tip, they're only going to get better as well, given the personnel that they have coming back. And just a quick one as well on Richie Hogan starting at the weekend. It was his first game to start for Kilkenny in nearly 2.5 years, since the 2020 All-Ireland semi-final. And his perseverance is unbelievable. A guy who's riddled with injury, back spasms, back problems, all sorts of different muscle problems, and he just keeps going and going. He played 50 minutes the other day and he looked pretty sharp, and I think it's a great thing for the hurling championship, even just to have a guy like that. It's 9 years since he was hurler of the year. Still
a joy to watch, Michael.
Oh yeah, he's beautiful to watch. And just it's something we won't get into now, but he could easily have been the best player of the last decade, injury free. I know, and it's just a pity that we've been robbed of that. But he might yet have that swan song.
Well, you'd love it. And I remember him being on the show after the red card in the final, and he was talking about his back, and even to go and have a puck around on his own in a field isn't really doable without lengthy warm up and almost a physio massaging him, getting him going. So Lord knows what he's done to get himself back playing. We are out of time. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Cheers, Joe.
Michael Verney of the Irish Independent with us. And hurling on Off the Ball is with thanks to Bord Gáis Energy, proud sponsors of the Senior Hurling Championship and the Legends Tour Series as well, which takes place at Croke Park.